Back in the day, the Muromachi period saw the rise and fall of two very different aspects of Japan. On the rise was the vast improvement of the arts, technology, and the reshaping of culture. On the fall, however, were the prestigious shogunates. 14th century Japan saw the Ashikaga family take the seat of power. Shoguns were traditionally known as military rulers, taking power over Japan in 1185 after Minamoto Yoritomo gained control over the nation and established the shogunates. This family was known as the Kamakura shoguns, who later lost their power to the Hojo family and only remained rulers in name. Because of this decrease in power, the Ashikaga shogunate were by far the weakest of shoguns Japan had ever seen since the inception of the title. This weakness of the family, of course, had major consequences for the rest of Japan. Due to the lack of political power that the shoguns had, they often fell into conflict with provincial warlords, the daimyo. Infighting, class conflict, and changes in culture led not only to the collapse of the nation's capital of Kyoto, but also the fall of the shogunate title near the end of the 16th century. As they always do, such intense clashes of power also coincided with changes in culture and arts. While the Muromachi period was ripe with military conflict, it was also a period of innovation in Japan. Arts, transportation, and religion all underwent major changes during this era, and nowhere is it more clear than in Noh theater. Noh theater was one of the most significant things to come out of this period culture-wise, with it still being one of the most popular forms of theater in Japan today. Noh largely concerns itself with moral dilemmas and questions regarding what comes after death. It's essentially an existentialist play that's spliced with comedic intermissions known as the shogun. Noh has its origins heavily dipped in the pool of religion, namely Buddhism and Shintoism. During the Muromachi era, Zen Buddhism was gaining traction across the nation, which led to Noh taking heavy inspiration from various Buddhist and Shinto rituals when it came to the performances seen on stage. Some major ritualistic influences were dengaku, which were rituals performed by peasants, serugaku, which was fast-dancing comedic rituals and acrobatics, and bugaku, which were the traditional masked dances of Japanese courts, which were introduced by China. These masks were a defining trait of Noh, with the main characters wearing expressive masks to show which character or figure they're depicting. These characters were often stock characters, usually demons, young women, old men, priests, and spirits. These plays came in 5 different forms: makimono, which were god plays or plays with a religious theme; shiromono, warrior plays or plays with a doomed main character; kazumono, woman plays or plays with a heroine, which of course they were played by men; kijumono and genzaimono, which were miscellaneous plays that revolve around emotion, especially love; and kirin-no, which were demon plays or plays with a deranged main character. Going back to the conflicts that laced this period, it's clear why plays regarding existentialism grew to the popularity that they did. With how war-torn not only Japan was, but also China, India, and Africa, the thought of death or disaster leered over them like a shadow. Now, you may be thinking, Noh was developed ages ago, who cares about what's going on in the Muromachi period and how people coped with it? And although, yes, Noh is hundreds of years old, it still has reach today. And reach I will, because when I tell you Jason goddamn Todd relates to Noh theater, I goddamn mean it! Back in the day, the 50s and 60s saw an overtaking of superhero comics. Classic figures like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America, and Robin all took the stage. Superhero comics weren't always as dark and brooding as they were today. That, however, changed with the Vietnam War. As more men got sent to war and more men came back, for lack of a better word, completely fucked up from it, the media shifted to reflect that. And reflect that it did, because in the March of 1983, Jason Todd was introduced to DC. Jason Todd, similarly to the Muromachi period, is a character that was defined by the political and social conflict that he grew up around. Unlike Dick Grayson, who was the first of Batman's Robins, Jason grew up in the poor slums of Gotham, Crime Alley, where various crime lords and drug lords fought for control of the area. By the age of 12, Jason took up the mantle of Robin and was taken in by Bruce Wayne, where he stayed for 3 years until a run-in with the Joker. Now, for brevity's sake, Jason was not raised by his biological mother. When he found out who she was and that she was being blackmailed by the Joker, he told her he was Robin in hopes to help her. However, he wildly overestimated how much he mattered to her, and she turned him over to the Joker, where he was then beaten and blown up. This, of course, was a betrayal very similar to that of the warlords during not only the Muromachi period, but also the War of Three Kingdoms in China, where various rulers went to warlords and said, "Hey, can we get your protection or help when fighting this other clan or other province?" The warlord would say, "Yeah, I got you, man," but then would turn around and assassinate them. Now, you may be wondering, how on earth does some dead kid from the 80s correlate with a form of theater that deals with morals and the afterlife? Simple. Because Jason Todd didn't stay dead. Ever since his death and subsequent rebirth, Jason Todd has been both a ghost and a demon in the narrative, serving to be the antithesis to the entirety of Batman's character. In opposition to Batman's morals, Jason took up the long-dead mantle of the Red Hood, where he aimed to control crime instead of completely destroying it. But to control crime in Gotham, you have to kill. And to kill would mean breaking Batman's number one rule. By the end of Batman Under the Red Hood, Jason had Bruce Wayne and the Joker in a confrontation, a battle of their morals. With the Joker at gunpoint, Jason gave Batman an ultimatum. Bruce could either kill Jason or let Jason kill the Joker. The movie and comic have two different endings to this. In the movie, Bruce turns his back on Jason and doesn't attempt to stop him from killing the Joker. In the comic, however, in a desperate attempt to not let someone die in front of him, Bruce throws a batarang at Jason and slits his throat in an attempt to save the Joker. For correlation's sake, we'll stick with the comic route for this. A fun fact about Jason Todd's character is that he was never meant to come back from the dead. When Bruce threw the batarang, Jason was meant to die. It's why the time between each fatal injury between the Joker and the batarang is by far some of the longest seen in the comics. He was never meant to come back. So by slitting Jason's throat, Bruce compromised his own morals and beliefs by the sheer fear of not being able to follow them. Even if he did survive, he was still a ghost of the boy who was Robin. His resurrection changed nothing. He was still haunting them.
Sir, in light of all the recent events, would you like me to remove that?
No. This doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything at all.
This haunting, of course, is similar to how the conflict and wars and political and religious changes going on during the Muromachi period influenced No theater. No reflected everything that went on before it developed. And similarly to Jason, Jason reflected everything that developed him, his past, his life with Bruce, his death and subsequent resurrection. Everything that went into Jason and how he was made can be reflected and found in No theater itself.